All right, Shalom. This is the brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rukah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who will believe in this word in all truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the name of the one they ignorantly call God. Yahweh Shai is the name of the one they ignorantly call Jesus. Bahashem is in the name. Rakah is spirit. Kodash is holy. Akyam is brothers. Akwath is sisters. Shalom means peace. And Yasha Allah is Israel in the ancient Paleo Hebrew. This Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14 says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. This is also Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 9. And it reads, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? All right, and I want to go into a lesson through the Spirit, another installment of the great game dealing with the continent of Africa and how it relates to world war. All right, according to prophecy, there will be a third world war, but we understand through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shah that the Lord is present in the details. All right, and what's growing in the continent of Africa is a change of influence. The Chinese, all right, which are the Moabites, and the Russians, all right, which are Edomites that occupy the land of Japheth. All right, that's why in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, it says, verse 2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And all of those names mentioned are lands that Japheth inherited, but are now occupied by Esau Edom, all right, who identify themselves as Russians, but they're all a part of the nation of Edom, all right, whether they call themselves Americans, Germans, all right, Australians, New Zealanders, all right, they're all a part of the family, if you will, of Edom, all right, the self-proclaimed white man, as he's called today. His biblical nationality is Edom, all right, but dealing with Ezekiel 38th chapter, the Edomites that dwell in those lands who call themselves Russian, all right, the Lord has ordained them to be a big part of prophecy, all right. And what you're seeing on the continent of Africa is a change of the guard. You're starting to see a lot of nations choose the support of Russia and China over the support of the West, all right. And this is all according to prophecy. That's why the Lord said, hell from beneath is moved to meet thee. All right. Now, before I continue and get another precept, I want to get this news clip because this was the recent news that happened fairly recently concerning the country of Nigeria in Africa. All right. So
The U.S. losing to Putin, more than 1,000 U.S. military personnel getting kicked out of Niger, an essential military agreement falling apart. Niger, once a major American ally, turning instead to Putin. Russia has been feverishly working to expand its presence, not just in Niger, but across all of Africa, mineral rich and many, many countries, with one top U.S. military official warning that several African nations are, quote, at the tipping point of falling under Russia's influence. Out front now, John Sullivan, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia. And Ambassador, we have seen this in countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, across Africa. Now you've got 1,000 Americans kicked out of Niger, a 10-year deal over. This was a crucial location for U.S. troops, counter-terror efforts. Putin now gaining ground. Can you explain why this matters so much?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be with you. Yeah, this has been a longstanding problem that the Russians, through their proxy organizations like the Wagner Group, have been working to ingratiate themselves into these countries. It undermines the United States counterterrorism mission. It allows them to expropriate the natural resources of these countries, valuable natural resources, gold, including some that are essential for U.S. national security, like uranium.
Now it shows you how hypocritical they are. But I want to touch the subject that he mentioned. He said that the influence is being taken, all right, and ultimately it's justified. All right, when you see how the Americans in the West have dealt with the so-called African nations, they've dealt with them treacherously. Really, when you look at it, all right, this is why they have all of these mineral resources, but they're not able to capitalize on it because you have what they call economic hitmen. All right, it's colonialism by another name. All right, where they use this economy and they use high interest rate loans that they give to these countries that they know they can't pay back in exchange for their raw materials and resources. And now these nations are waking up to the con and the game, and they're deciding to choose another alternative, going right back to prophecy. All right. This is why they're losing influence. So let's go here. Ezekiel 38:2 reads, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith Yahweh Bashem Shai, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. So you see this alliance forming through organizations like the BRICS, all right, where you have these nations beginning to choose different alliances outside of the alliance of the West. They're trying to get around the EU NATO system, all right, because under that EU and NATO system, there's unfair advantages for the so-called white men in the West compared to the nations that they're dealing with, all right, and they're tired of these backwards deals. All right. When you see how Esau deals with these other nations, he deals with them with a very prideful nature where he pretends like he's doing them a favor and he pretends like what he's doing for them is generosity, but really he's just stealing from them with a smile on his face. All right. As a matter of fact, I want to get this clip really quick. All right. And this is from the South African president. Now, this was back in 2023. I want to say it was back in 2023, but this is him talking to Macron, the French. I don't know if his official title is president, but he's talking to the French president. All right, and we'll go into some other information on that, Lord willing. So without further ado,
it will help us not to participate as unequal cousins in these institutions. It will help us to participate fully, and so that we don't have a sense that we are beggars, that we are being dealt with out of generosity. I think it's important in the new era that the world is in now that there should be a good measure of equality among sovereign nations. You know, recently, 7 African.
so he's mentioning equality over sovereign nations. Now, when you have a president saying things like this, it means that the deals that have been happening behind closed doors between these Edomites in the West and these African countries has been a one-sided deal. And they're tired of the one-sided deal. All right. Now, Russia and China, they have their own agenda as well, but compared to the West, they are looked at as a better alternative. And that all goes back to prophecy. Ultimately, the Lord is putting the spirit on these nations to move, all right, to carry about his will. All right. As a matter of fact, let's go here. It's Revelation chapter 17 and 17. For Yahweh Shema Shai hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of Yahweh Shema Shai shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And how has that woman, all right, which is America, reigned over the kings of the earth? through that NATO EU system. That beast system allowed her to stretch forth and rule over these nations. And now they're waking up to the fact that they're in one-sided deals. And this is why, as much as CNN is trying to paint it like these guys are being deceived, they're not being deceived. They just realize that they're in a bad deal. And then Russia and China's coming in and saying, look, we'll treat you like equals. All right. And it's beautiful through the spirit, because you have to remember that war is just an extension of foreign policy. You know, as a matter of fact, in this article here on the study of war and warfare, and this is from the Modern Institute of War at West Point, I'll just get the point right here. It says, first, war is political. Or it says, as von Clausewitz observed, war should never be thought of as something autonomous, but always as an instrument of policy. All right. So eventually that instrument of policy is going to be used. And this is why the scriptures talk about the third world's woe. See, right now, all of the diplomacy is starting to deteriorate. All right. And these nations are beginning to choose sides. They're beginning to, all of these nations right here are beginning to side with the Russians. And the Russians offer them a better deal. Not only do they offer them a better deal, but they treat them as equals. Now, again, those are still Edomites. They still have their own agenda, but this is all for prophecy to be fulfilled. All right. So I'll continue with this video.
In Niger, for example. So it's a national security problem for the United States, but it's even bigger problem for all the people who live in these countries whose autocratic governments are now associating with what amounts to a private military contractor / terrorist organization like the Wagner Group.
And you mentioned the Wagner Group. You know, before Prigozhin was killed in that plane crash, after his attempted coup, you know, we had marched half of the way to Moscow. He and his mercenary army were, you know, deeply involved in Africa, right? That was where he had actually gotten so much of his money, from all of the minerals and all of the deals that he did, natural resources, weapons running. And can you tell me how active they still are, the Wagner Group, and what are the mercenaries? How are they getting mercenaries there?
Well, Aaron, it's really like a franchise, the way to think of it. The Wagner organization, we call it Wagner, it was really a bunch of corporate shell companies that recruited Russian military, other military personnel to go in and provide security services to autocrats in these countries. The franchise founder has been eliminated by Vladimir Putin, and now they're recruiting more military personnel to go in and undermine security, undermine the counterterrorism mission in these countries, support autocrats, and undermine the West.
So
Now you have to keep in mind, right? And I want to play all of that because you see that CNN is very biased and they really push a lot of propaganda. Because what they're not telling you is that these countries are calling these Russians to come in. The Russians aren't invading, they're being invited into these different nations. All right, but this shows you the level of propaganda that Esau is using to convince people that what's going on between Russia and Africa, all right, is illegal. What's going on between China and Africa is illegal, and it's not. All right, these nations are waking up to what's going on and they're starting to choose another option. All right, now I want to go to another clip that kind of goes into this same subject, because there's a reason that these nations are choosing to go with Russia and China as opposed to the Americans. All right, because they've had a shitty deal, excuse my French, for years now. Every time they get a leader that wants to do right about their country, they get eliminated. And she's going to go into it. Salaki, let me just go into the video.
Where a crime is committed, people agree on the policing of that, how you investigate it, how you hold accountable. One of the most fundamental corruptions of the social contract in human history is colonialism.
Yeah.
And it's that mechanism that some states have used to extract resources from other places, such as Sierra Leone. That deprives countries of the resources they need for government services, for education, for health. So I was hoping you could reflect a little bit on what those forces have done to Sierra Leone and what kind of accountability we might be able to think about. just to imagine a way forward from where we've begun now.
And before she continues, again, I may not have mentioned it, but this is the first lady of Sierra Leone. Her name is Fatima Mata Bayo. She doesn't speak for the Sierra Leonean government. He's just asking her a question. But again, I wanted to make a point that what she's going to go into is a system that they've been dealing with before this Russian and China alliance happened. So she's going to give you a perspective from a so-called African living in those lands on how they see it. All right. So when you look at CNN, they paint it like these so-called African countries are being deceived, but she's going to paint the picture so you really get an idea of what the Lord is doing behind the scenes. These nations are waking up according to the Spirit of the Lord. The Lord said to have raised up the kings of the earth, and they're being raised up and they're waking up to the deception, so to speak. They're waking up and realizing this is an unfair deal. All right. So Lord willing, this is edifying. I'll just play a couple minutes of it.
When you look at what Sierra Leone have to offer, when it comes to our mineral resources, the kind of mineral resources we have in our country is enough to take care of everybody in that country. We should not have a single poor person in Sierra Leone. But unfortunately, we are not given the free will to make decisions on our own mineral resources. There's always Big Brother who decides. And when you fight and say, no, we are not going to do this, they use the system to stop you. It's either they set you up with the opposition and they'll be supporting the opposition against you from the back, or they cause unnecessary chaos in your country so that you are not able to even govern your own people. They will do things to make you not to be functionable. And of course, any country that don't have peace cannot develop. You have to have peace before you talk about development. I'll give you a simple example about Sierra Leone. Every mining company that is in Sierra Leone today is owned by a foreigner. Every mining company. If it's not the Chinese, it's the American, it's the British. Our electricity, Bumuna, is run by the British, and we still don't have light. We're looking for light, electricity. If you don't have electricity, how can you talk about education? How can you talk about health facility? How can you talk about improving the infrastructure of your country? We don't have electricity. Now, do we actually even have proper water, pipe-borne water, so that our kids will not be sick? We don't have those facilities. Why? With all the minerals we have, there is a cap you put. Before my husband became the president of Sierra Leone was benefiting, they said, what's the word? 0.000.1%. What is that? Basically, a company can take as much as $100 million out of the country in terms of minerals, and then they can just give the country $10,000.
So that's the deal that Sierra Leone and many countries like that have been having to deal with for a long time. And this is why the scriptures talk about the nations joining Russia, all right, because that's a better deal for them. All right, it's the lesser of two evils, if you will. And eventually this is going to culminate in war, because we read before, war is just a form of foreign policy. It's just a arm of foreign policy, if you will. Because by these nations siding with Russia, those mineral resources now go to these Russian-China alliance. All right, so America stands to lose a great deal with this kind of influence being lost. All right, and that's going to result in war. All right, now she explained that none of the systems that are in her country, you know, as far as the mineral, who pulls the minerals out of the ground, all of the things that they could use to capitalize off of those things that are in their country are owned by foreigners. Now, I want to get a brief clip of this video. This is a TED Talk from the economic hitman himself, John Perkins. All right, and I'll just get the first few minutes of his TED Talk, and we'll go from there.
The presidents of Indonesia, Ecuador, Panama, members of the Royal House of Saudi Arabia. And I've said something like, in this hand, I have millions of dollars for you and your friends if you play our game. In this hand, I have a gun in case you decide not to. Now, my words were more diplomatic than that, but that was the message. I was an economic hitman. And we economic hitmen have created a new global economy, really, a form of capitalism that I call predatory capitalism. It isn't working. We all know this. The oceans are rising. The glaciers are melting. Less than 5% of us live here in the United States, and we consume almost 30% of the world's resources, while half the world is on the verge of starvation, or actually starving. That's not a model. China can't do it. India can't do it. They're trying, but they can't do it. We have to change. We have to have a revolution. We must change the system. I'll get into that.
And what's going to happen is the Lord is going to change this system. All right. The Lord isn't going to change one part of this system, because that's the mentality that these people have. You just need to tweak a couple things in this system. No, the Lord is going to remove this system. All right. Real quick. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. All right. And he is, as the scriptures say, they will make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. So they're openly admitting the treachery that they've dealt with concerning other nations, man. And that's why they're not going to be, they're not going to go unpunished. All right. This is Isaiah 33 and 1. Woe to thee that spoilest, woe meaning destruction, and thou was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. And when thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. All right. And the form of policy he's talking about is treachery. He started it off by saying he has money in one hand. All right. And he has a gun in the other. All right. And that's exactly how they walk around the earth. All right. Presenting this silver or lead proposition where you either take the bribe or you take the bullet. All right. As a matter of fact, before we continue, I want to grab this. So this is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 and verse 10. It says, let us oppress the poor righteous man. Let us not spare the widow, nor reverence the ancient gray hairs of the aged. Let our strength be the law of justice, for that which is feeble is found to be nothing worth. All right. And that is the foreign policy, if you will, of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. All right. Because Esau, as a nation of people, this is how they deal with every nation that they encounter. And this is why the Confederacy is being formed against these Edomites in the West. So I'm going to continue. I want to jump up to, I want to say this, 38. Yeah.
I was trained by a woman named Claudine Martin, whose job it was to train me to be an economic hitman. Now, Claudine had seen my NSA files. She knew that I wanted three things that I thought all my prep school buddies, the rich kids, had had: money, power, and sex. Claudine was really good at her job. And she promised me the first two: money and power. And she taught me quite a bit about the third. And then she told me what my job would entail. I would go to countries with resources our corporations covet, like oil. I'd arrange a huge loan to those countries from the World Bank or its sister organizations, but the money wouldn't actually go to the country. It would go to our corporations, Bechtel, Halliburton, Brown and Root, familiar names, to build big infrastructure projects in those countries and incidentally make huge profits in the process. They'd build power plants and industrial parks, things that would benefit a few wealthy families in the country, the ones that own the industries. But the majority of the people would suffer they would be left holding a huge debt they couldn't repay. So we'd go back and say, since you can't pay your debt, sell your resource, oil or whatever, real cheap to our corporations. Privatize. Sell your utilities, your schools, your jails, everything like that to our corporations. And Claudine also told me that if the leaders of these countries refused my offer, people she called jackals would be right behind me. I didn't actually carry a gun, but the jackals did.
And see, there you have it, you know? And that's why, man, real quick, this is Micah chapter 2 and verse 1. And it reads, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Because he spoke on the resources that they covet, you know, and what they do is they come in and they take it by force. They take them by violence. All right. Because even bringing this deal that somebody can't repay, you know, is a form of violence, if you will. You're robbing these people, you know, and this is why these African nations are rebelling. You know, what the first lady of Sierra Leone was explaining was that this is the system that they've been dealing with for decades now. So it's no surprise that all of these nations, these African nations, are starting to turn to Putin, all right, and China to get a better deal, because they've been dealing with this type of treachery for a while now, all right. And this is why the nations are beginning to rebel. This is why the nations are beginning to lift up the head, if you will. All right. Matter of fact, this is Joel chapter 3, and I'm going to jump down to verse 9. And it reads, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. And that's exactly what you have. All right. These nations are siding with Russia, and they're becoming more and more bold. All right. And I'll go back to it. This is Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 9. And it reads, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All right. As a matter of fact, in the NLT, it says, in the place of the dead, there is excitement over your arrival. The spirits of the world leaders and mighty kings, long dead, stand up to see you. And that's exactly what you have. You have a spirit amongst these other nations that are starting to be a confederate against the whore, all right, which is America, Babylon the Great. All right. So I want to touch these videos through the spirit, you know, in this installment. You know, Lord willing, I'll be able to add to it with another installment through the spirit on some other information I have. But for now, Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Bakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwat, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.